Hi, welcome to the debrief of HB 273. I am Melanie Valentine. I've been in the EdTech community for several decades. I was previously the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant Program manager. And when the funding for the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant went away, so did my position. I've started a consulting business and excited that I get to be here today to show you all these things. Before we start, I want to talk a little bit about the terminology. The name of the bill being discussed is HB 273-2026. Now, next year, there's going to be another HB 273-2027, and that's going to be confusing in a year, but it's not going to be confusing yet. So right now, we are going to talk about HB 273. And incidentally, if you're interested, HB 273 has become the bill 53G7228. So we're also going to be talking about R277-334, and that is the State Board of Education's interpretation of the bill and what that means. So the two things that we are going to talk about today are HB 273, which is the bill, and R277-334, which is the board rule. And please note that this is just a draft of the board rule. This isn't the whole board rule. We'll know more in August, after August 6th, whether or not this passes. So let's start with the basics of HB 273. It does three things. First, it reduces the amount of time students will be using computers at school, and it also establishes ethical use of AI, and it increases educator training on the balanced uses of appropriate technology at school. So let's look at the timeline. The timeline is February 26th, HB 273 became a law, and in June, the Utah State Board of Education Standards and Assessment Committee drafted Board Rule 277-334. Now, July 1st, HB 273 was enacted. So just because it was enacted doesn't mean that you have to be in compliance in 2026. You don't have to be in compliance until next year at this time. And then December 1st, USBE is required to release model frameworks, 5 of them, 1 for AI and 4 for other grade bands. And then last of all, June 1st, 2027, that is when you, the LEAs, need to have either created your own framework or adopted a model framework and trained your personnel on these models. So notice that enacted means that there are plans in the works, but nothing needs to be officially adopted until July 1, 2027. But there is something that has to be said, is that parents and parent groups might think differently. The impetus behind this Balance Act, HB 273, is that parents wanted more balance in the classroom with technology. So since this bill passed, and it will most likely, before school starts, be a board rule that's been enacted, parents are going to assume that, oh, now this is going to happen. But it's not going to happen for a year, but you might want to know that parents are going to have this expectation, and you might want to spend a little time front loading that and educating parents, telling them what you're going to do differently right away and what you're going to wait to do until you have further training and better context. So speaking of context, let's look at the whole bill. So here is the not as basic HB 273. In K3, bans all non-essential screen time with some exceptions. And we're going to have to talk about non-essential screen time because that definition is really important. Grades 4 through 6, we need a balanced tech with teacher-led print methods. And computers stay at school, and there's no homework requiring computers. Skipping to junior high, parents opt in for take-home tech, and there is a balance between digital and analog lessons. In high school, parents may opt out to take home tech, and also there needs to be a balance between digital and analog, and high school students may participate in an AI sandbox if parents opt in. So we just went over the bill, the law. Now we're looking at the board rule. And please know that this is a draft. This was drafted by the Standards and Assessment Committee, and it's going to go before the full board on August 6th. So one of the things that the board did is that they gave explicit definitions of direct instruction and non-essential screen time. And we're going to go into that in the next screen. They also said that parental device monitoring was required. Provide parents, upon request, access to student accounts, credentials, browsing history, and option to receive alerts for flagged sensitive materials. Now, this sounds really intimidating, but some districts have already got this in place. Davis has a solution. Washington School District has a solution, and they've been really helpful to say, oh, this is like $3 a student, and this is how this works. So that's doable. It's probably just getting some kind of tool for that. Generative AI restraints. This prohibits students from using generative AI for academic work unless authorized by an educator. And also the R277-334 gives guardrails for AI sandboxes, and that's strictly limited to 9 through 12. Now, no, everything I just read you is a draft. It hasn't been passed. It's just a draft. So as promised, we're going to talk about screen time. We're going to talk about the definition of screen time in the law and the definition of screen time in the draft of the board rule. So the law says screen time is when the device does not involve instruction, guidance, or interaction with a teacher, an instructor, or other designated education personnel. So the clarification that you get from the board rule is non-essential screen time and direct instruction. Non-essential screen time is any student screen exposure that is not directly connected to instructional objectives, direct instruction, supervised academic activities, or approved educational accommodations. The mandate is that LEAs minimize this type of screen time. Direct instruction is defined as educator-led instruction involving active supervision, interaction, guidance, facilitation, or instructional support provided by a licensed educator or designated educational personnel. Under the rule, if a student's device use is part of direct instruction, it is not considered prohibited screen time. So here are exceptions to screen time. I think that these are pretty intuitive. So kindergarten through grade 5 computer science standards. One thing that's not clear is what about keyboarding? Is that going to be allowed? The preparation for administration of standards assessments, IPs and 504 plans, online schools, tribal nation schools. Some tribal nations act as ISP internet service providers. So we need to talk about the case of adaptive software. And I'm talking about Lexia or Alex or iReady or Imagine Learning. So before we talk about that, let's look at the definition of non-essential screen time. It's the time a student spends using an electronic device with a screen in a classroom setting when the use of the electronic device does not involve instruction, guidance, or interaction with a teacher, instructor, or other designated educational personnel. So, does adaptive software fit this? There is no official word from USBE, and I don't know if there will be. But I do know, I went to the Rural Schools Conference last week, and many LEAs are deciding to keep up with their practice of adaptive software. Many are not. In fact, STEM Action Center, they gave all of the licenses out and said it's a district decision. It's an LEA decision. So, however, there's something to really keep in mind here when you're making this decision. There's something that we don't want. And this is a practice that parents have noticed, and it might even be part of the impetus behind the Balance Act, why parents wanted this law so much. And that is that in many cases, the use of adaptive software is built right into the master schedule, and it's used as babysitting for students, keeping students occupied so the teachers can plan, give tier 2 interventions, eat lunch, attend PLCs, and devastatingly, I believe, is ignoring the data that these programs provide, putting students through this ordeal, having data available, but not using it. And parents will notice. Parents have noticed this, and they will notice this. So one thing we don't want to do, even though the official deadline to have all of these changes implemented is in 2027, we don't want this practice anymore. But I think that it's fair to say that this is a new change. In fact, as late as 2023, schools were instructed to meet fidelity. And if you didn't meet fidelity, you got a phone call from a USBE specialist, and it might even been me, to say you are not in compliance and you are in danger of losing your funding for this program. You're on probation is the word that we actually had to use. So this is a new thing. And many schools, it hasn't been that long, it's a new thing that we're not doing this. Many schools are still using that model, which may be a direct reason this bill was written. But if your school still has this model, technically you have until July 1, 2027 to adopt new practices to be compliant. But parents are going to notice, and if you could adopt better policies sooner rather than later, it will save you and your students and your parents a lot of stress. So let's talk about what's due. Compliance. If you need to be compliant, 3 things. First, submit a finalized policy to the Utah State Board of Education. And your policy has to include AI, K3, 4, 6, junior high, middle school, and high school. So 5 different policies. And that's after you've had a few months to look at the model policies given to you by Utah State Board of Education. Then you need to provide a statement confirming that your LEA governing board held a proper public meeting with an opportunity for public comment. And you also need to submit an adopted AI use policy to the state superintendent for formal review and approval. And this will be made available to you December 1, 2026. Here is my advice to you. Instruct all teachers, especially K3's teachers, to be extremely deliberate in any tech use. If possible, give them additional planning and training time. So not only do teachers need to get trained on new ways to teach and new technologies, but they also need to be given time to plan. They need to get time to think about, okay, how does this look? What does this look like in my day? What is this going to be? Teachers are going to need that time. And if you're going to use it, the next bullet point, if you're going to use adaptive software, use it sparingly, ensuring that a teacher is actively engaged and that the data is actively guiding instruction. My next piece of advice to you is to get stakeholder input regarding the frameworks that are due in July of 2027. And you've got 5 frameworks there. And await further instruction after R277-334 board rule is approved. So here are the next steps. Sign up for the webinar on August 11th, 10 a.m. The link will be in the recording for this webinar. Listen to board meeting discussion on August 6th, and you can find that at this website. And you can also look at the agenda a week before to see exactly when it's going to be discussed. And if you choose to keep adaptive software, ensure that you can justify it as essential screen time. Thank you very much. Reach out with questions or comments, and I will see you at the next webinar.